We're going to do a panel on restaking, opportunities and obstacles. For those of you who don't know, my name is Pranav. I work with Superscrypt. We're an early stage Web3 VC fund. We're based in Singapore and New York, and we're founded by Temasek. Cool. So, let's get into it. I think this is the first and the only restaking panel. We've got, a great bunch of you guys here. Let's just start off with, a quick, ELI5, what, one or two sentences of what, restaking is, where it is that, you guys fit in and your project fits in. And we'll maybe start from Lucas.
Hello. As far as restaking, I'm a founding contributor to Renzo. Who in the year has LRTs exposure? Who uses Renzo? Awesome. So as far as Renzo goes, I think the way to look at Renzo is we built it from the ground up. And when you hear us talking about building it from the ground up, we're the only project in, let's say, the top 5 when you look at TVL, where it's a brand new team, it's a brand new tech stack. And I think for the most part, it's really nice talking to everybody else and their different approach. But it looks like from a maturity standpoint, as the ecosystem is kind of taking off much faster than I think anybody here anticipated, even ourselves. Teams are kind of locked in the strategy and the routes that they've chose to decide to go down. And everybody's taken a little bit of a different approach. The way we thought about Renzo from the very beginning was to align incentives both on the supply side. When we talk about supply, is deposits coming in, and on the demand side with AVSs. And one of the most important things for us when we're designing and making protocol design decisions was to be able to accept both native ETH and LST deposits. That puts us in a position to build partnerships with BNB. Later this week, you're going to see Renzo launch natively on BNB, which means that we're able to take not only native ETH in, but when eigenlayer caps open up again, we'll be able to take BETH in as well and use as collateral within the protocol. And then on the other side with AVSs, eigenlayer being an open marketplace, we know that there's going to be a different variety of needs for AVSs. AVSs, some are going to prioritize native ETH, some are going to prioritize ERC20 tokens, and we feel it's really important to be able to collaborate in a permissionless way, align incentives on both sides of the funnel, and make easy ETH essentially the liquidity layer for DeFi and LRTs on rollups. When it comes to rollups, in the last cycle, we saw this happen where as ETH prices go up and demand goes up, like today, I think we saw gas fees go through the roof. We actually think that a lot of the DeFi activity around the LRTs is going to happen on rollups. So having a strong position on those rollups, being there early, having native integrations and that alignment, we think is going to be super important as the market kind of hopefully continues to heat up. So that's Renzo in a nutshell. Hand it over to Mike.
Great. Hi, everyone. So I'm Mike. I'm the founder of EtherFi. And EtherFi similarly is a liquid staking protocol that is natively restaked on EigenLayer. I think I agree with most of what what Lucas was saying, but there's a couple of points maybe that we disagree on. But so I'll say a couple of things. There's two things that make EtherFi unique. The first is that we have a very strong non-custodial proposition, meaning we're the only protocol where the stakers actually get to control their keys, both the validator keys and the withdrawal credentials, and that's super important. We also were very focused on ensuring that we launched with redemptions, with withdrawals built in. And that was sort of like a core of our value. And then the second thing is we're natively restaked. We're making the bet that native restaking is actually probably going to be the only game in town. and LST restaking is probably over time going to kind of wither away. That's probably kind of controversial at this stage, but we'll see how that plays out. There's a couple of other things that I think are pretty interesting from a risk mitigation standpoint. And there's a lot of levels of risks that are built into restaking, and there's been a lot of conversation around all the different aspects of that risk. There's a ton of smart contract risk built into it, in particular with LST restaking, where you're really taking kind of 3 layers of smart contract risk, and sort of much less so with native restaking. And then there's, of course, the slashy risk associated with all the AVSs. And I think everybody is taking a unique and interesting approach to how they manage the risk associated with restaking. In particular, like how do you layer the different AVSs that you support as an LRT protocol, and then how do you manage the exposure kind of over time? Like those are, and we have our own risk model around that. That is, I'm sure other LRTs do. That I think over time is going to be super important. Because in the staking universe, trust is really like pretty much the only currency, and so the protocols that choose a more kind of a short-term focused degen kind of path are ones that will have a flash, but then over time, as we've seen with lots of other categories, will kind of will fall away, and the ones that really put risk management front and center are going to be the ones that actually last and stand for the test of time. Maybe the last thing I'll say is just like a belief that we have about the market that I think is important and relevant. Is I think there's going to be a very different sort of run, I guess, that is going to happen in this sort of staking 2.0 world versus what we saw with staking 1.0. In particular, with the staking 1.0, we saw that you had like a winner-take-all effect with Lido, which made sense because when you look at the different LSTs from the sort of first generation, there really wasn't a ton of differentiation as far as like the user experience. Everyone was basically in the same DeFi protocols. Everyone was on the same dexes. The yield was the same. So as much as one can argue the technical merits and decentralization of one versus another, there really wasn't that much differentiation. So all the liquidity just poured into one. I don't think that's going to be the case for this new, stage 2 of restaking, of staking, because, with the thousands of AVSs coming online, there's going to be essentially an infinite way of repackaging those AVSs. And so there's going to be a much more of a fragmented market, which I think has a couple of implications. One, it's better for Ethereum because you're not going to have like one dominant player because there's just going to be different needs. And second of all, it actually leads to a much more kind of hospitable, collaborative environment where competitors can actually collaborate and work together and help each other out because we know it's not going to be a winner take all, and everybody's going to find their niche, which again I think is better for the ecosystem as a whole.
Okay, yeah. Hey, I'm Meir. I'm co-founder of Hydrogen Labs, and we're building Onzen Protocol. Onzen Protocol is kind of taking the other side of the marketplace from LRTs, and so we're actively managing payments for ABSs in order to optimize their economic security. So you asked, what is restaking? Really, restaking is restakers are taking on the extra slashing risk. Then the other part of the equation is, they have to be compensated for that. And so how it works essentially, we model out exactly what their economic security needs are. We created a metric for that, which is called the safety factor. Safety factor is based on a traditional framework for thinking about economic security, which is called the cost of corruption and profit from corruption framework. And so essentially the idea is it should cost more to attack the protocol than the total amount of value that's at risk of, being extracted from an attack. And the safety factor is kind of like the ratio of that. So you can think of it as like how over collateralized is your ABS on Eigenlayer. And yeah, so we calculate that for each ABS that we onboard into Onzen Protocol. And then we deliver that data on chain through a decentralized network. And once that data is on chain, it's consumed by a smart contract, which essentially within this smart contract, each ABS can set their desired target safety factor. So, they could say, we want our safety factor to stay around 0.5, let's say, for instance. And then if we see that the live safety factor, changed and now it's like 0.7, we know that they're actually paying more than they need to, to restakers. And so we can reduce the payments automatically within the smart contract and vice versa. Of course, if their security is too low, we'll increase payments to restakers. And then, more restakers will be incentivized to restake into the protocol. With all these LRT protocols, there will be many different protocols that are actively managing which AVSs are receiving restaked capital in order to, manage their portfolio efficiently. And so together, Onzen protocol and LRT protocols are essentially creating an efficient marketplace on EigenLayer.
All right. Clearly, we have a very right curve panel here. I'm going to give you the left curve side of this. So I'm going to plagiarize it from a tweet I saw that I thought was hilarious. It was EigenLayer is if you take an orange, you squeeze it and put it into a glass and you get orange juice, and then you put it in the freezer in the shape of an orange. Boom, $20 billion. So that's actually a pretty good explanation, with the nuance that you don't have to freeze it into the shape of an orange. So I don't know, to me, this just clicked and it cracked me up. So that's what EigenLayer is. Specifically Omni Network. Basically, we took that orange juice and froze it into just a super performant blockchain that lets rollups talk to each other. That's my TLDR. What's up next?
Okay, so you're going to be in let's say an ABS.
We're in ABS. We use restaking to facilitate this.
So given I guess as the conversation goes on, the three levels of smart contract risk you mentioned. So how do you, I'm getting an echo? How do you as an LRT decide which ABS to secure? How does that relationship work? How do you decide between the risks and rewards, and how do you as an ABS decide, what kind of potential partnerships and relationships will you be having with LRTs? And you, Meir, you come as a cog in the middle of these two. So how do you think of this as well?
Yeah. So at Renzo, if you go to our Mirror page, we published an article at the beginning of December, and Mike did a really nice job talking about risk. If I could build on top of that, given we're playing in a DeFi environment and everything is permissionless. When we look at AVSs, we're actually agnostic on AVSs. We don't want to be in a position where there's a centralized player or person making a decision around which AVS to secure. We're going to see AVSs with really high yields. We're going to see AVSs that come out with large fundraising announcements and a lot of hype around them. And our thesis internally is that we actually have to be agnostic to the noise in the market and have a model and a framework that allows us to assess the risk reward of every single AVS on the same level. And the way we do this is we've started working on it, and you'll see it in the Mirror article. I ask everybody to read it. It's literally 2 pages. It takes less than 10 minutes to read, but we've come up with a new way to define risk. And it comes from TradFi. It's not something we've created, but we're trying to take portfolio construction theories from TradFi and apply them to an open market, which EigenLayer is, and AVSs. And we've come up with a term called max loss. And the way we're planning at Renzo to allow the DAO to control which AVSs to secure, what weighted basket of AVSs you want to have exposure to, is by defining what the max loss of each AVS is. And the way we do that, it's not just slashing risk. I think everybody, when they think about yield, they think about, there's a slashing risk associated with it, and every AVS will have different slashing conditions associated with it. But we have Figment here, capital, but on the Figment Inc. side, so where Mike had said, for example, that, and this is the unique thing about the space, where they have a very large decentralized set of operators. We're actually on the complete opposite side. We think that having a smaller set of operators that are extremely high quality, institutional grade, we're talking about P2P, we're talking about Figment, we're talking about Luga, Kelm, Galaxy, is actually important at the very beginning of an ecosystem, because as we talk about EigenLayer, there's a lot of variability, the more variables that you have, the harder it is to control that risk. So we think that a higher level of node operators with institutional grade node operators is going to be able to allow the ecosystem to secure AVSs. On the max loss piece, though, when we think about max loss, it's not just slashing. There's costs associated with securing each AVS. So we're coming up with a framework, pricing conditions on the operator side. What kind of hardware requirements do they have to run? How much does it cost them to run that? Is there a risk-reward benefit? How much TVL do they need in the node to make it actually profitable for them? The point that I'm trying to make, there's a lot of variables. It's not just slashing risk and yield that we're going to be able to collect over time. The framework is rather simple now because we just don't have the data. But as the data starts coming in, we'll be able to apply different weights from a risk perspective on maybe geographic distribution of the nodes. So that's how we think about it. The DAO is going to be able to see the risk return of each AVS. And the way to think about Renzo, it's going to be a beta exposure on AVSs. So like a weighted basket of AVSs. It's not going to be securing 5 AVSs with 100% of stake. There'll be an adjusted weighted ratio across AVSs as they come online.
That's so interesting, and I think it actually speaks to like the fragmentation where like we're taking a completely different approach in almost every way, but I think they're both totally valid. So just to I'll touch on the smart, because you asked specifically about smart contract risks. So I'll touch about that, and then I want to talk about the contrast because I think they're really interesting. So I kind of briefly touched on this idea like native restaking versus LST restaking, and LST restaking is bad. In my view, I'm being facetious. I like to, hyperbole. So native restaking is when a protocol like, let's say EtherFi spins up validators, withdrawal credentials point to eigenlayer, and the ETH actually lives in the beacon chain deposit contract. So it doesn't actually live in EtherFi or in eigenlayer. So if we get hacked, for example, or eigenlayer gets hacked, there's actually a very small amount of ETH, relatively speaking, that's at risk. That's the benefit and the value from a security standpoint of native restaking. The contrast with non-native restaking with LST restaking is you're taking, let's say you're talking about a wrapper token like EigenPi, for example. I picked that arbitrarily. No, EigenPi is great. We love EigenPi. I'm just using that as an example. So you're taking 3 levels of smart contract risk there, because you have the wrapper token, you have the LST itself, and then you have eigenlayer. Any one of which gets compromised, there's going to be a problem. For any given wrapper of an LST, that may not be a problem. But if you're an AVS and you're saying, okay, I'm going to accept 4 or 5 different LSTs, that's a multiplicative effect, right? And so the amount of slashing and hacks and issues is going to be a lot worse. I won't get into other issues, but there's a lot of reasons why native restaking is just a much better product, and we've kind of made this philosophical decision. Maybe that's a bad idea, but like we're all native exclusively. Okay, so that's the smart contract risk side of it. In terms of the risk management side, we're taking a completely different approach. We are going to be extremely picky and bespoke with the AVSs that we support. At least initially, for the first, let's call it a year, maybe even more, where I don't think there's enough data or characterization on AVSs out there to be able to, for us at least, to feel comfortable constructing a sort of a programmatic model. And so we are going to be just very picky and deliberate and methodical around choosing AVSs. Our risk model is, I won't even try, because if I tried to describe it, I'd need, diagrams, and then it probably would make even less sense than the rest of the stuff I'm saying. But it's a different risk model. We're looking at it more from the standpoint of how much ETH and how you layer that ETH across different AVSs, and running, taking more like a simulation approach around estimating what the expected yield versus potential downside might be. Again, that probably didn't make any sense to most people, but at a high level, that's what we're doing. Over time, I do think there is an opportunity to create a more programmatic approach with governance, but that's not the direction we're taking. The other thing is, we philosophically again have chosen to really align ourselves around Ethereum and decentralization, and so we've been really big on solo stakers and trying to think about how to incorporate the solo staker kind of universe into restaking, because they, for the most part, get boxed out for a lot of different reasons out of restaking, which we view as problematic. And then I still don't feel super happy with our validator set, with our operator set, just from the standpoint of we don't have enough diversity there. We have about 15 operators, which we like, but we'd like that to be much larger. Okay, maybe I'll stop there.
By the way, one thing, Mike and I met for the first time in person like 10 minutes ago, and we've actually never spoken in person. We're in Telegram groups and stuff together, so it's really interesting because we do collaborate as teams quite a bit, but we do see the market very, very differently. And it goes back to what Mike was saying. There is going to be so much fragmentation and demand on different sides of the pie where I think we'll both be able to do very well.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's better it's literally better for everybody. I don't think anybody benefits except for, if there's one player. Aside from that one player benefiting, it's not really good for anybody. Not that I'm talking about anyone in particular.
I'm glad I could bring you guys together. So let's flip that question over to you, right? As an ABS, what's the kind of relationship that you foresee having with LRDs, and how do you see that going ahead?
Yeah, so this is a pretty interesting question, because if there's one thing that's going to be the Terra of this cycle at this rate, this has the highest probability. I mean, everybody knows there's substantial risks going on with this stuff. We're talking about massively rehypothecating collateral, to the tune of $10 billion. So we think about this a lot. All the criticisms of this is a super dangerous thing to be playing with, fair. And people building on this, need to be extremely thoughtful about this. And so from our perspective, the number one risk that I see happening is just there's some degen, AVS, not down my mind, we're going to get some Ohm-like thing on Eigenlayer. I've been building in crypto for 7 years, losing money for 10 years in crypto. It's going to happen. We're going to get to that point in the cycle. So what we care about from actual network building on this is really what's the overlap we have with the degen stuff. I'm totally I was just talking with the VP of engineering at Eigenlayer before this, and I was actually, I think this whole whitelisted rollout thing is unnecessary, because what we're seeing behind the scenes as we're talking with operators and LRTs is quality selects for quality. I think there's going to be a naturally selective property in this market where the market incentives actually line up, where non-crazy, long-term, stable, large-scale systems match with other players on the other side that share that same perspective. So I simultaneously hold a view that this could get very degen, but I think just opening up the market for this is probably the best way to do it. But to be very clear, the biggest risk for us as a network actually building on this, an ABS, is that some pool of collateral is securing our network, and it's also securing some other really degen thing, or degen hundreds of things,
Meir, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, the other risk for ABSs as well is, what happens if, it becomes profitable to exploit the protocol, right? If you don't have enough security. So yeah, what we're trying to do is figure out exactly how much security do these ABSs actually need at any point in time. And so we're measuring, the cost of corruption, which is, how much ETH is being restaked. If it's through pooled security, then we have to calculate, like you were saying, how rehypothecated is that ETH, and kind of take that into account. Is there dual staking? Is there off-chain rehypothecation with borrow lending loops? And then, measure that against the profit from corruption with these protocols, and ensure that the cost of corruption does not become lower than the profit from corruption. Because, if, let's say if you're an ABS, you're paying out operators, and then suddenly some whale comes into your protocol and deposits a bunch of tokens, right? Your profit from corruption, the amount of value an attacker would win if they hacked your protocol, just spiked up. If your payments are just staying flat and you're paying the same amount as you were before, now somebody can just come in with a bunch of ETH and basically take over your protocol, get slashed, but make more money anyways just by exploiting the protocol. I mean, it's an overly simplistic idea, but yeah, you think about a Bitcoin bridge or something like that. these scenarios become a lot more plausible. So yeah, that's really where we're focused on trying to, make sure that AVSs are reacting dynamically to these situations so that they don't.
I think it's worth, to me, what's sort of an obvious and inevitable situation is there are going to be degen AVSs. I guess what I'm saying is there is going to be a mass slashing event as a result of this. 100%, there's going to be $1 billion, whatever the number is, $1 billion of ETH sent to 0x0. And that's where survival matters more than optimization. Like in this type of environment, in this type of system, tail risk protection literally matters more than anything else. And so at least for now, that's why I think being super bespoke, very careful about this stuff is the only way that one can actually survive the inevitable craziness that's going to happen. And not that we're already not in that space.
I think kind of close it out here. One, I think Hash3, I don't know if this is a fund or something. Anyway, I read this post. They described it as we see this world evolving into kind of like bond operators. Like there's AAA bonds and there's junk bonds. I kind of see a decoupling like that happening where we can have just open innovation for crazy stuff. And then also just large scale, more stable, probably lower yielding, but you feel comfortable holding it and not checking in on it every 8 hours because your heart rate, so I think we'll see a decoupling. That's kind of my perspective on this.
If I could just add to that, I think this is the amazing thing about EigenLayer, where earlier I was talking about a weighted average across AVSs, right? There's a way to actually capture an AVS that might have some degen yield. You don't have to secure it 100%. You could actually, if you build a protocol that's flexible and efficient enough to secure maybe 5% of the overall protocol to capture some of that yield and manage that risk. I think that's the exciting part. I think a lot of times we talk about black and white, but it doesn't have to be that way. And similar to the TradFi markets, you can have a weighted basket across different types of bonds without being fully at risk. So when you think about max loss and trying to capture some of that additional yield, I think that's where we get really excited because you could manage that risk. That doesn't mean you have to go 100% in. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of lessons learned from the lending markets on DeFi. When you add a new collateral asset, if you've ever seen Compound and Aave and even Euler, they add an asset, but they have supply caps. They have collateral factors, right? So there's the collateral factor, for example, is how much you could actually borrow against that asset. You slowly scale into these positions and you don't have to scale in 100%. So I think it's really important when we talk about risk and managing risk, there's best practices that we see in DeFi that's worked and hasn't worked that will allow a weighted basket approach to be able to secure some AVSs that are going to be fully degen, but you still want to capture some of that yield to, on a weighted approach, be able to get the yield a little bit higher without taking on significant risk. So I think that's where we get really, really excited, and having a protocol that's flexible is going to be important.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.